I'm honored today to have with us an author who I got acquainted with when our Sunday school class used her book for a series of Sunday school lessons. Julie Clawson is a mother and former pastor and the author of Everyday Justice, the global impact of our daily choices. And she's also written The Hunger Games and the Gospel, Bread, Circuses, and the Kingdom of God. She's a frequent speaker on topics of spirituality, culture, and justice. She holds degrees in English, history, and a master's degree in intercultural studies from Wheaton College. And she's currently studying at the Seminary of the Southwest. Julie is a science fiction fantasy geek, a wannabe foodie, theology nerd, a social justice advocate, and loves to play board games. Julie lives in Austin with her husband Mike and her two imaginative children. She can be found writing about faith and justice, culture, and whatever else at julieclawson.com.
Especially once I heard the theme of this, that every child deserves a fifth birthday. And as a mom, I have a child who is approaching his fifth birthday, and you have that empathy as a mother, knowing that there are many children around the world that don't get that chance to be able to be part of this and part of the work of trying to make that possible for so many children. It's very meaningful to me. I want to say it's probably really easy to say that in this room, most of us who are gathered here are pretty much aware that the world is full of a lot of pain and suffering, that there are these issues of poverty and hunger and oppression around this world. But it can also be very easy to get overwhelmed by that, to feel so disconnected to the problems around the world, from all the abstract issues and the distance of people living, all around the globe, that we can feel very helpless in the face of all of that pain. So today what I want to do is just make it a little more personal by telling some stories. Telling a little bit of my story, telling the story of people around the world, and the story of how we are all connected to that. Because our lives are connected. Our day-to-day lives are connected to the stories of people around the world. And many of the justice issues, many of the stories of pain and the stories of suffering are part of our story as well. Yes. Okay. I don't talk that loud. All right, is that better? That works? Awesome. Okay. All right, well, I want to talk a little bit about story today because we are story creatures. We're narrative creatures. Our lives are stories. We come from somewhere and we are going somewhere. We might think that we're the star of our own show, the center of the universe, and the story is all about me. But the reality is that our stories connect us to people all over the world. How we live our lives connect us to the lives of people on the other side of the globe. From the girl who sewed the shirt that you put on this morning, to the man that picked the fruit you ate for breakfast or even this afternoon. You're connected to their stories. If we go through life ignoring these stories, focusing on just our role in this grand drama, we can often miss the fact that many of these stories involve pain and suffering, and that we often are contributing to them. We might not want to know that we're connected to these stories, but that connection is real nonetheless. And many of these stories involve that pain and suffering that we can contribute to, when we pretend that we're the only ones that matter. This is something that children can really easily get and latch on to. A few years ago in the church where I was volunteering at, I was teaching Sunday school with the children there around this time of year, before Christmas, and we were, of course, doing the nativity story of Jesus being born among the animals in the manger. Well, I was telling the kids that all over the world today, children are born in very similar circumstances, are actually worse, where there is no sterile, wonderful hospital environment for them to be born in, where there might not even be medical supplies or clean water. And the children were horrified by this. What they knew of how babies are born and what part of a bigger story. But as an adult, I find that it's often a lot harder to discover how my story intersects with the story in the stories of others around the world. You know, I can get that I should feed the hungry, take care of the homeless. Not that I do those really well or all that often, but that makes sense to me. It's a figuring out how my story was involved in the stories of oppression and injustice that was far more difficult. When I first started thinking about how I was connected to others, I had this vague sense that my consumer habits contributed to, these stories of oppression and pain, that they affected others negatively. But that was a far cry from understanding the details. So, being the nerd that I am, I decided I wanted to start researching the stories of the things that I encounter in my day-to-day life. Find out how my story of just me living my day-to-day life, connected with the story of people around the world. And so I discovered things like the story of chocolate. Many of you probably have heard some of the stories behind chocolate. But for me, it was a bit an eye-opener. I mean, we all love chocolate. We have it for birthday cakes. My kids are always wanting chocolate, cupcakes for their birthdays. Or, it's Halloween candy, Christmas candy, Valentine's. We give people chocolate to show them that we love them. It's a secret indulgence. It's a special treat. It's something we all love. But the story of chocolate is involved with pain. And it's involved with children not being able to be children and be able to celebrate birthdays and live a life like children should. The story of chocolate goes back that there's been a history of wanting to keep chocolate really cheap because it is that special treat, because it is that indulgence, because it is that children's, candy, given at Halloween, it's a special thing for them. So the chocolate companies have always tried to keep the price of chocolate incredibly cheap. Back in 1947, when the stores in Canada raised the price of a chocolate bar from 5 cents to 8 cents, children actually took to the streets in protest, saying that this was just completely wrong. How dare they expect us to pay 8 cents for a bar of chocolate? And so companies have kept the price of chocolate low. I mean, you can go into H-E-B and get like 2 king-size Hershey's for $1 or something like that. And it's insanely cheap to pay for chocolate. The problem is that the price of chocolate hasn't kept up with the inflation and the cost that it takes to actually produce that chocolate. And so the farmers that grow the beans and the cocoa beans that we get our chocolate from have to look to ways to cut costs in whatever ways they can. And that is mean that it's turned to cheaper and cheaper forms of labor. And as the UN has reported, many of these cocoa farmers have turned actually to child slave labor to grow the beans for our chocolate. Places like Ivory Coast is where most of the world's chocolate comes from. The UN has reported that most of the chocolate has connections, most of the chocolate that beans grown has connections to child slavery. The farmers there, what they do often in that culture, children are apprenticed out to go work at farms. It's not like that children aren't expected to work in a lot of the agrarian cultures around the world, but that in this culture, children are sent to other farms to learn a trade. So these farmers go to a family and say, hey, we have a wonderful job for your child. We'll be sure to give him food, education, a bike, and wages. It'll be a great time for him to learn this trade. Well, then they take this child from a neighboring country like Mali. They usually drug him and then take him across the border into the Ivory Coast, where they can't. There's no jurisdiction back and forth, and they force him to work in the cocoa fields, usually sleeping in very small trailers with many other young boys, chained up at night so they can't get out, and forced to work from sunup to sundown, picking the cocoa beans. And they want children to do it because their hands are very small. And as the UN has reported, most of the chocolate that we eat in our country comes from farms like that use child slave labor, even though it's completely illegal to import anything in the United States made with child labor, or slave labor for that matter. That is the story of our chocolate. And as I was realizing the story, finding out these details, reading the stories of some of the boys that have escaped from these slave camps, and their owners were given maybe a 30-day jail sentence for trafficking them, kidnapping them, and trafficking them and using them as slave labor. I realized that when I was buying the cheap chocolate, I was telling the companies that I was okay with that. That I was okay with them how is denying that to children around the world? Our stories are connected. I also started learning the stories of things like our electronics. I mean, we live in a wired world, and often far more so than almost any other place. And many of us over this last year, as the news has caught on it, have heard a lot of the stories coming out about the Foxconn factory in China, where a lot of our electronics, Apple, because it's the big name, they point that out, but basically any e-reader, a lot of cell phones, a lot of laptops come out of this factory, and there's reports of a lot of injustice and abuse happening in there and exploitation of the workers. But the story and injustice of our electronics goes even a little deeper than that, than where it's manufactured. I'm sure many of us have heard about blood diamonds. The movie with Leonardo DiCaprio kind of exposed that a few years ago, and how they're connected to terror and violence. But we often overlook the other products that go into our electronics have similar connections to terrorism. So between July 30th and August 3rd in 2010, there was actually a reign of terror unleashed in the villages in the Congo's eastern mining districts. There were some, let's say, 200 to 400 rebel soldiers raided villages in the North Kivu province, and what they did was they would gang rape all the women there and many of the young children. Peacekeeping forces found babies as young as 1 month old that were gang raped by these terrorists coming into their village. And what they do is to come in and establish control through fear over these villages. They impose these acts of terror upon the villages, so the villages would give them control of the mines nearby. And from these mines come the very precious minerals that go into our electronics and that are only found pretty much in that area of the world. Things like coltan, things like tungsten, things that make our cell phones vibrate. These are the stories of the things that we use on a daily basis. And I don't think any of us could let go of now. We're so addicted to it, but we're connected to these stories of terrorism, these stories of pain, these stories of children being terrorized and violated at such a young age. These stories represent my everyday world. Everything I encounter on a day-to-day basis, my cell phone, my laptop, my clothes, the chocolate, the food, the coffee, everything I encountered connected me to someone around the world. Real people with real lives, with real stories. That's the reality of our lives. We may live very busy lives and think we have little effect on the world around us, but whether we like it or not, our daily actions are more far-reaching than we can ever know. All too often, people are being hurt and oppressed in the process. Human trafficking, hunger, acts of terror aren't just abstract issues out there. They are all stories that we are connected to. But we are not powerless against these forms of injustice. Like the children in my church who wanted to do something to help those mothers and children once they knew their story, each of us has the ability to help the world be full of better stories. So for instance, if our everyday actions, the stories our lives tell, contribute to injustice, then there has to be doable everyday ways to do things differently. We can live differently. And there are numerous ways that we can do that. I just want to focus on two very, very basic ones today before moving to other bigger ideas. If our consumer choices contribute to the exploitation of people or the exploitation of this world, we can choose to start consuming ethically as much as we can. That means knowing about where the things that we're buying coming from, knowing who produced them, that they were produced in a fair manner, and choosing when it's available, when we can, to give our money to those groups that are producing that and caring for people instead of hurting them at that time. Be as simple as buying, things have been fairly traded. Fair trade is a label. I'm sure you've all seen it on something. It's not a perfect system, but it's a system that tries to ensure that the workers who produce the good, be it clothing, coffee, chocolate, sugar, a lot of beans and things like that, that the workers who grew it were paid a fair wage, enough that they were able to survive. It's not an inflated wage or it's not a great wage. It's the absolute bare minimum that requires for them to be able to survive in their culture. And so they're guaranteed to get at least that, and also to not be exploited. That wherever this product came from, slave labor wasn't used, child labor wasn't used. Women were allowed to have a voice in contribute to that. And she was like, okay, when that's available, I'm going to buy that instead of the other options. There's one small step we can take. Knowing where our food is grown, getting to know people at the farmer's market, getting to know the local people in your local community, to know where they're sourcing their coffee from. There's many wonderful coffee shops around here in Austin that have direct relationships with co-ops down, especially in Mexico. And they're helping families stay in their land instead of being exploited by a lot of the major coffee companies. It's helping them out, showing people care and love and compassion instead of trying to save a buck and get things as cheaply as we possibly can. There's chocolate available that is guaranteed slave-free. It costs more, but it's they're not passing on the savings to children that aren't being paid anything. They're being kidnapped from their homes. This is just a small little thing we can do to shop differently. I mean, I think we live in America where the biggest shopping time of the year. But, there are choices we can make. Just to do tiny little things differently to show compassion and care through our actions instead of exploiting others. At the same time, there's another thing we can do is choose to live more simply. I know that's kind of a hard thing to say right before in the middle of the Christmas season here. But so often we believe that we are defined by what we consume. That as long as we have the latest toy, the trendiest clothes, the latest whatever, that is who we are. But we're people. Our humanity is so much deeper and bigger than that. And so making those choices to not always have to have the latest gadget, to, heaven forbid, recycle what we have, to get things fixed, to choose to not use products that create more waste and hurt the world, which hurts the people of the world, contributing to much, poverty and illness around the world as well. So making these small choices, live simply, consume differently, is something that anybody can start doing in very small ways to make these little tweaks in our lives. Because our actions affect people, and so to choose to have our actions affect people in different ways is one small thing we can all do. But at the same time, there's no certified conflict-free cell phone out there. I can't go into my local AT&T store and say, okay, I want the cell phone that's guaranteed not to have exploited anyone in the Congo. There's people working on it. There's recycled ones out there, but that's not a widespread thing yet. So we need to use our voice. We can be activists using our voice, telling the companies that we like. There's only a limited number of cell phone providers here in Austin. We're all going to be using cell phones. It's what we do. Tell those companies that we care about where their products come from, and that we want products that are guaranteed to not have exploited people, to not be involved in terrorism, and that we're willing to spend the money to pay for that. To tell our government, to use our voice to tell our government that we want them to enforce the rules, the laws, that say things can't be imported in the United States that have contributed to terrorism, our child labor, our slave labor. Use our voice and to let the people that are running the show know what we care about, know that caring for people, caring for their stories is something that matters to us, and that we're willing to put our almighty dollar behind it to stand behind our beliefs. But sometimes the stories are bigger than just the everyday habits of our life. The issues of clean water and maternal health that these were not directly related to the daily habits of those children in my church, but they found a way that they could help out by raising money for the medical kits. Similarly, just to tell one story that many of you may recall the stories of the food riots in Haiti back in 2008. Most of the world watched with pity, and a number of people said, well, why can't they just be growing their own food? They live in a tropical island. Where's that coming from? But what they were missing was the story of what was going on there. And there's a story behind why there is a systemic issue of poverty and hunger in that country. In the United States, where even the poorest in this country rarely spend more than 16% of their yearly income on food, it's very difficult for us here to understand countries where spending 40 to 50% is the norm. And then what happens when the price of something like rice, which as it did in Haiti, rose 114% within 1 year. It's almost unfathomable to our minds about how impossible it is to get food at that point. although Haiti used to be able to produce all the rice it needed, I mean, it's a wonderful tropical country, that all changed because of this regulation imposed by the IMF during the 1980s. After the dictator, Baby Duvalier was ousted after he bankrupted the treasury in Haiti after many years of debt and problems in Haiti. So far, before that, Haiti received multiple loans from the IMF to help rebuild. However, the strings attached to those loans required Haiti to drop tariff protection on their crops like rice and open up their markets to imports like the heavily subsidized tariff-protected rice from the United States. So within a couple of years, the Haitian farmers discovered that they couldn't compete with the imported rice from the United States and found themselves out of work. And so they stopped growing rice because there was no money in it. They couldn't make a living doing that. But when all of a sudden the price of rice rose dramatically, the people found themselves unable to buy foreign rice and had no local options to turn to. Many turned towards eating mud. Okay, all right. Sorry. I was saying many there turned towards eating mud mixed with oil as their only source of sustenance. So these stories of systemic issues of poverty, this poor infrastructure, corruption, lack of resources, and disease that plague places like Haiti, and I'm sure many of you involved in results know many of these stories around the world. That these are systemic issues. They go bigger than simply our little stories that encompass the whole of our national stories, our global stories, our corporate stories. And these are larger stories that all of us are connected to, but in systemic ways. Charity, these stories require things like charity and relief and changes to policy, trade policy, the forgiveness of debts. But we too are not powerless to affect change in these ways. Those of you here know that we have the power of our voice. We have the power to affect change on this major scale. Giving money to groups, giving charity to groups that work in areas to provide relief, but also to lobby, for the governments to change policies, to give, part of our budgets to working on these very specific issues that can change a lot of these major problems. So we can use our voice, and people in Haiti can see the results of that. People around the world can see the results of that. Our story is not our own. We are connected to the stories of others, and we all have the power to ensure that our contributions to those stories are good ones. From tweaking our daily habits, to using our voice, to donating to good causes, we can all work for better stories. Any of us can do these things. Maybe not all at once, but in small, little steps, little by little. They are immensely doable. We can tell better stories. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Julie. That was waking us up to the stories of others and helping us be present for what needs to be done in the world.